Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Y Pod, where we highlight everyday Wyoming leaders. Very excited today to talk with Joe Wright from Kennon Products. You're going to hear about some amazing things happening right here in Wyoming. Joe, thanks a lot for doing this today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Eric. I really appreciate it.
Excited to hear about Kennon, what you do, where you're going in the future. Before we do that, Joe, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I'm a Montana native, and after high school, ended up going to college at North Dakota State as well as Montana State. So I'm an engineer by training. After college, worked for UPS for 13 years. So UPS is the largest employer of industrial engineers in the nation. So obviously, being a large corporation, learned a lot. Also moved around a lot, and during that process realized that I missed the mountains. So my wife and I were extremely fortunate to both find jobs in 2010. So she's a nursing instructor here at the college, and obviously I started with Kennon in 2010. I think that one thing that I really appreciate as it pertains to Kennon is it's a smaller company, very much an entrepreneurial spirit. The purpose that we serve and the mission that we serve, in regards to protecting the warfighter, is extremely personal and important to me. So every day flies by. I feel really good, about the mission I have in life. And then, in addition to that, we're an ESOP, so basically we're an employee-owned company. So this idea of creating long-term wealth for our people is really a rewarding aspect of my life.
As you mentioned a few minutes ago, before we started to record, things have changed quite a bit at Kennon. And when the company had started, and you still maintain a product line in this area, but you were involved in general aviation, what is it that folks would see here to give them an idea of what a general aviation product is?
Yeah, so we started in 1984. The founder started the company then in Temple City, California. In 1989, moved the company to Sheridan, Wyoming for basic quality of life reasons. But when we talk general aviation, think small prop jobs that are flying around the airports. So for example, you can see one there that's over by Jackson Hole. But again, we started with general aviation. And the primary product that we began with was sun shields. So sun shields basically just keep the cockpit cool, specifically the avionics. So there's a great picture there, just kind of displaying that. So for a while we did that, and then basically we started getting into the military side of the house. So essentially that's when the Gulf War hit in the early 90s, and we transferred that knowledge into protecting military aircraft. So in that particular picture right there, that's a Black Hawk. And again, just protecting the aircraft while they're on the ground, ensuring that they're mission ready. So when they do have to deploy, that there's no issues with debris or sand or rocks in the engine, and they can fulfill their mission pretty quickly.
And Joe, you probably weren't with the organization at this point, but it makes me curious if that was an intentional pivot on the company's part. Did they want to move away from general aviation, or did they want to embrace the military and general aviation? Have you heard through kind of the back channel at the company why they made that switch?
Yeah, so we maintained general aviation throughout the process of moving into military. It was a pretty natural transition, but essentially what had happened is there was a person that worked for the Air Force at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and they had seen our sun shields in a private aircraft and wanted to start utilizing them for DoD aircraft. Because again, going back to the Gulf War, you're talking about aircraft that are in pretty arid, hot climates overseas in the Middle East. And so at that point in time, we were engaged by them and developed sun shields for all of the aircraft in the DoD's inventory.
And here we have obviously a very different craft. How's Kennon involved here?
So that's a C-17. So you can see the aircraft covers that protect the engine. So this is a really good example. This was a blizzard that happened in New York several years ago. And if they would not have had our covers or covers in general, then all that snow would have been in the engine. So they would not have been able to deploy the aircraft. If they had to, they would have had to essentially clean it out before being able to do anything.
Again, a very different craft, probably a similar type of an idea.
Yeah, we started kind of transforming into not only just serving, like for example, Air Force bases, but we started getting in on the front end of things. So this is an F-35 that got introduced. This is a ceremony at Nellis Air Force Base. So we provide all of the aircraft covers to Lockheed Martin, who produces the F-35. So it was kind of a natural transition to start getting in on the front end of basically protecting aircraft. So we work with the Lockheeds, Boeings, Northrop Grumman's, Sikorsky's of the world. So again, it was just kind of another natural transition for us.
And so for someone who's not involved directly in this industry, I see something like this and it gives me a little goosebumps about how cool it must be to work on some of these craft and with these product lines. Is that at all the same for you? Is it totally old hat for you because you see it all the time?
No, it's completely awesome. We have people that visit these aircraft all the time. For example, we have engineers going out to Hill Air Force Base in Utah to crawl over F-35s and F-22s this weekend. I've had plenty of opportunities to visit, like in this case, been down to Fort Worth and visit the manufacturing facility. It's 2 miles long, producing F-35s and F-16s, and it'll give you goosebumps every time.
That's good to hear. I thought it was just me, Joe.
No. Yeah, and this is so somebody's actually folding up an intake cover for the F-16. So this is the Thunderbirds, which is the showcase squadron for the Air Force. And I think this one's pretty impactful. Number one, that they chose us to be their cover provider. But number two, especially on a day like today, where it's the 19th year anniversary of 9/11, it's a really good reminder of the mission that we serve and protecting our warfighters. It's awesome.
And you mentioned before we started to record that as we're recording this, you guys within your company are recording a video in memory of this occasion as well. So it's something that goes more than just skin deep or product deep for you.
Yeah, I think as you alluded to a little bit earlier, sometimes you get into the day-to-day and you forget what you're actually working on and what the purpose is, because you just deal with it every single day. But, especially on a day like today, that's a pretty important event in our history. Every year we show a tribute video to 9/11, which always brings about tears and emotion. But more importantly, it's a really good reminder of why we do what we do.
And speaking of being cause-driven, this is another situation that seems like a pivot for the organization because a very different product line in a totally different industry. What are folks seeing here, Joe?
Yeah, this is our soft suicide prevention door. So we sell these all over the U.S. We have a distributor in the U.K. But essentially what it is, it's a magnetic textile door that goes into behavioral health units. So you take like a magnetic door frame and you plop it up. It provides privacy to the patient in that particular environment. Unfortunately, the most common way for people in that environment to harm themselves is to take something like a bed sheet, roll it up, and they'll find a ligature point. So think like a door hinge, and they'll try and hang themselves and harm themselves that way. So if you can imagine being in a behavioral health unit, they're always extremely bland. They're stripped of pictures and all of that stuff. And so number one, it really feeds into what we do, which is protect high value assets, in this case, life. And number two, the idea of providing some aesthetic and some calming, soothing features in that scene I think is extremely important. So it's definitely a big part of what we do. And another thing we have to remind ourselves of how important these products are to the individuals they serve.
And the shift from general aviation to military aviation seems like they're at least similar in some way, shape, or form. The shift into healthcare or behavioral clinics does not seem like it's at all in a similar swim lane. How did that come your way?
Yeah, and back in 2009, there was a couple ladies at the VA here in Sheridan, and our VA is a behavioral health VA. It's one of several across the nation, but they basically brought down this duct tape looking thing and said, hey, can you make this? And what it evolved into was what you see on the screen there, the soft suicide prevention door. But I think what's kind of cool about what we do is we're not just a manufacturing company. I kid people, we're the second largest employer of engineers in Sheridan. We have 13. But we hired our first engineer in 2006. So by this time, we had a few engineers on board. And most of that was specific to Department of Defense work. But by virtue of having that kind of innovative knowledge and spirits, we were able to take this prototype and concept and actually bring it to commercialization. So although the market is seemingly much different than what we historically have done, which it is, the concept of how we put it together is very much in line with our capabilities.
And a fantastic way to make a positive difference, which is obviously important to you. Shifting gears just slightly from product lines you're currently involved in, when you look forward into the future, there are a variety of things that you're undoubtedly excited about. Could you tell folks what they're seeing on the screen right now?
Yeah, we have quite a few engineering projects going on currently and have gone on in the past, and some bright prospects for the future. But 13 engineers, we got to keep them busy, and they are actually extremely busy. But if you look at the one on the left, we, again, going back to a lot of the engineering work we do is for the Department of Defense. So one of those aspects or projects is specific to ballistic protection. So in this case, it's specific to the V-22 Osprey, which is the tilt rotor aircraft. If you ever seen Transformers, it would be that aircraft. But kind of the impetus of it was in 2000, I think it was 2012, there were two V-22s that were shot up over South Sudan. And so the military identified a pretty important, significant need to provide, ballistic protection. I think most people are not necessarily, they don't think about it, but our aircraft are not bulletproof. In order to be bulletproof, there would have to be half-inch steel plate and never get off the ground. So we are currently in the middle of a pretty significant engineering effort to basically provide, that value of protection, and hopefully, things turn out where we can actually produce these here in Sheridan, which would be awesome. The one on the right, it's kind of hard to imagine, but what you're looking at there is a radiation shield for the KC-46. So the KC-46 is it's the militarized version of the Boeing 767. So it's the purpose of it is when this particular aircraft is flying up in the air and there is a nuclear event, that it protects the crew from essentially becoming incinerated and burning alive. That sounds pretty dramatic, but that's it. So we were contracted by the Air Force to come up with a solution. There was nothing out there, so we had to develop materials and figure it out. And so we wrapped up that particular project this spring, and we are just beginning the production. So eventually there'll be over 200 KC-46 delivered to the Air Force by Boeing, and all of them will have these particular systems in place. And interestingly enough, if you're kind of an engineering geek or get into some of the details, so in order to qualify, it's called Sandia Labs down in New Mexico. Basically, they have all these different mirrors, and then they harness the sunlight into a very succinct point. and basically direct it at our shield that you're seeing there, and it has to withstand that, which is, it's mind blowing that our engineers were able to come up with a solution to solve the problem.
Of all the places they turn for answers, they come to Wyoming. I love that idea, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah, and as far as what you're looking at here on the left there, so that is the V-22 Osprey, looking from the back. So you can see the cockpit at the forward portion there. And kind of in the circle piece, that's what it looked like before, and then the larger after aspect is what we installed. So what this is what we call the cabin liner system for the V-22 Osprey. So this was specific to what's called the HMX-1 squadron, which is it's the presidential helicopter squadron. So it flies around VIPs. So think, foreign dignitaries, press corps. The First Lady is actually, she flew across the Atlantic, touching our cabin liner system, would have been last year, which is kind of cool. But if you've ever been in a military aircraft, it's kind of like being in a garage without drywall. There's hydraulic lines, all sorts of stuff that's kind of hanging around. They're extremely loud and noisy. So that particular group of people are used to it, but when you get other folks that just aren't used to that environment, so we came up with a solution with some basically aerospace foam, and the way it's attached is pretty important because it's composite aircraft, so it's pretty easy to affect the structure, if you will, if things aren't installed correctly. But again, our engineers came up with a solution, and that's is flight worthy, which is the first flight worthy, flight qualified product that we ever actually produced. So it has to withstand, I think, a 20G load. In other words, if it does crash, that it can't compromise the troops. So that was a pretty significant event in our history. It's pretty cool.
And a question for you about that, Joe. The idea that they would be added to an existing military aircraft, my assumption is that then they're taken out and it returns to normal military service when they're not transporting dignitaries. Is that the case, or does this stay permanently in an aircraft that then only works with those VIPs?
Nope, you're absolutely right. It's easy to install and remove. So it actually takes two people about a half hour to put that in, even less time to take it out. So yeah, that's the purpose. When they're actually doing military missions, they take it out, but when they're flying the VIPs around, they put it back in.
Makes sense. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, what do folks see there?
Yeah, this is really exciting for us. So this is a life preserver unit for the U.S. Navy. Again, it's another engineering effort that we're actually getting close to the culmination of, but essentially what we were asked to do was to reduce the footprint, so think weight and bulk. The incumbent solution is about 4 decades old. You can imagine the warfighters changed a little bit in that amount of time. And there's also been some issues with the incumbent solution. So kind of a powerful story that we've been told several times, which is a little sombering, but also a good reminder of the impact, but the importance of what we do. There were a couple people that ditched in the Atlantic Ocean out of an aircraft. The one person pulled the ripcord, so that's what inflates the system. So when you see the orange, that's the bladder that actually buoys the soldier above the water. So the person pulls it, they inflate it, they're fine. The other person has not. So the person that is inflated starts yelling at the other person, pull your cord, pull your cord. Unfortunately, the last thing they see is the person's hand up in the air with a broken off ripcord, never to be seen again. So it's really exciting that we have the ability to, again, serve our mission with protecting high value assets, in this case, the warfighter. And the really exciting thing about me, beyond obviously this important purpose, is that what you see there, as far as the bladder goes, that particular material is only made by one company in the world. It's as far as the strength of it, it's comparable to steel. It's really, really impressive material. The problem is it's really difficult to work with. And our engineers came up with a solution of basically bonding the material together. And it's still kind of the paradigm that it's impossible to bond this stuff together. And our folks did it. We have a machine here that does it, that's only exists one place in the world. So it's really, really exciting.
There seems to be to me at least, a theme running through a lot of what you do. And it takes me back to a comment that a friend made about engineering. He said, engineers are in the problem solving business. And it sounds like that runs through a lot of what you guys do on a daily basis.
Yeah, without question. I get the question sometimes that, what kind of engineers do you hire? And the answer is it doesn't really matter. You're not going to go to school to learn what we do. It's just not going to happen. There's some advantages. We have a PhD material scientist that has, certain knowledge that's pretty important based off what they learn. But for the most part, like you said, it's problem solving. And I would say we're really good at it.
It sounds like you are. It sounds like it's taken you a long way so far. One of the things I suspect that doesn't change about your business, regardless of which industry you're in or product you're working on, are the how behind how you operate. And these are the core values for Kennon. There may be certain ones that jump at you as an individual or as the CEO. One that really jumped out at me was in the very first value, it talks about the shared authority to do the right thing. What does that phrase speak of to you?
So we're really transparent in the good times and the bad times. If you were to ask anybody on the floor, they could give you a pretty good representation of how we're doing as a business. We share our financials. And the reason behind all that is we became an ESOP in 2015. So essentially right now we're 31% employee owned. So one of the, getting back to what motivates me, this May I was able to hand out $2.5 million worth of stock certificates to our folks, which is awesome. But it's the way our culture works is, people have the authority to do what they think is right, to serve our mission and serve our customers. And I think that empowering people to do the right thing is a pretty significant part of who we are as far as our core values go.
The other one that jumped at me, Joe, off of this, because you don't often see it in company values. You can feel it sometimes when you walk into a company, but rarely do you see it on their list of values. And about a little bit more than halfway down, there's this word fun. You don't often see that in a corporate set of values. Why is that a part of what Kennon thinks is important?
Yeah, I think that I don't think if you don't have this, you don't have, for us, you don't have the culture that you want in place. So even though, I think what we do is extremely serious, important, impactful, it's not all seriousness here. I think it's really important that people embrace being themselves, the diversity that we have here, but also enjoy their time here and away, and that we encourage people that they need to relax a little bit, enjoy themselves here, and actually, even from a health standpoint, take care of themselves first, which means that they have to take time for themselves, whether it's through skiing or hunting or paragliding. There's all sorts of things that our folks do, but I think it's also, we put it on our list because we want to remind people and incentivize people for having fun.
While serving a great mission, which it sounds like you certainly do. Is there anything else before we shift away from this idea of the core values of Kennon? Anything else that you'd like to call attention to before we move away?
I guess the only thing I would say is kind of a parting comment is that it's been a weird year. And I think our core values in any company's core values have probably been challenged this year. So having them on the wall and talking about them, I think has been pretty significant for us. and a good reminder of maintaining that culture and doing what we do. You know, in my time here, and I think in the history of Kennon, we've never laid anybody off. And obviously there was a lot of uncertainty earlier this year, and you know, we communicated upfront early and often that that was not going to be the case. And I think that just speaks to our core values, and really just, you know, how we go about doing things.
As you say, it has been a challenging time, and yet, even during this challenging time, exciting things, not just from a product point of view, but exciting things from a corporate point of view are in store for Kennon. For folks who are not familiar with Sheridan, this is a landmark just outside of the town proper. We see Weatherby on the other side of this photo. Why is this location something you and I might talk about, Joe?
Yeah, we've been working on basically expansion for over 3 years now. Um, and, you know, we realized several years ago that based off the trajectory that we were on, that our current facility was not going to be compatible in the near future. And certainly even today, we need more space. I would love to be able to move in tomorrow, but that's not going to happen. So through a series of conversations with myself and the founder, we found a path forward on expansion. So we broke ground back in April. The building is actually set to start going up here in a couple of weeks. We'll have what's called a beam raising ceremony to actually celebrate it. And then we should be able to move in June. The only other thing I would mention is in the previous picture, we're higher than Weatherby, if you didn't notice that. So you can tell Adam and Brenda that we're just a little bit higher than them.
It's Wyoming's version of the tower race.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, when you see this rendition of what the building will look like, it's going to be incredible. And then you were kind enough to share one from the inside as well. As you were involved in the various design conversations and visioning where you guys were going to go, what was it that you were trying to create out of this, Joe?
I would say two aspects were really important to us. One is kind of the functional aspect and being able to have a lot of flexibility, whether it was in the office area or the manufacturing area. And then the other aspect was something that really fit our culture. So what you're looking at here in this particular picture, this is in the office area, and you know, it looks like, you know, you're getting ready to watch a basketball game, if you will. But the purpose of it is up until when COVID hit, we would have company-wide meetings every single day, and you know, getting back to this whole idea of being transparent. Lots of communication was shared, and so now we actually will have a venue where we can have 60 some odd people be able to comfortably sit and be socially distant, where we can actually continue sharing that information on a daily basis, which I'm really looking forward to.
It looks incredible. And again, to speak to how amazing it is what you're doing in Wyoming, I think this is a building that wouldn't be out of place at all in any of the metropolitan cities around the country, maybe even around the world. It's really exciting that you're doing it in Sheridan.
Yeah, it's we're really excited. A lot of natural light. It's going to be great.
Speaking of Sheridan, the last question I was going to tee up for you is, when you think about all the other places that this company could be located doing the amazing things that you're doing, but yet you choose to be in Sheridan, you choose to be in Wyoming, what is it that you like about being involved with the community? How do you think about Kennon's community involvement? Could you talk with us a little bit about where you find yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of our core values is care, which is about our people. It's about our country. It's about our community. You know, so as you mentioned, you know, Sheridan, at least specific to us, we don't do business in Wyoming. You know, all of our business is elsewhere. It's not like getting material or shipping products in and out of Sheridan is ideal, because it's certainly not. But from a cultural standpoint, it's a fantastic fit. Our people are extremely involved in the community. I could go on for a long time on all the different things and boards that folks are on. But it's expected when you come into our walls and start working at Kennon that we give back to the community. We believe that just by virtue of operating here, and if we're going to thrive, our community needs to thrive. And I'm really proud of all the different aspects our people have been able to impact, from Antelope Butte to Advocacy and Resource Center to the Chamber of Commerce to Rotary to the hospital, and the list keeps going on.
Having been at some community events in Sheridan, one of the things I also appreciate is it isn't just a matter of Kennon writing a check or putting your logo on something, because I've actually seen you and talked to you at those events, even when you weren't doing presentations. You just show up and you support. So it speaks well of you and of Kennon, and it's really cool to see you that engaged in the community.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Joe, thanks for doing this today. And again, back to that idea of community. Thanks for supporting Sheridan, for supporting Wyoming. Thanks for doing it here instead of choosing to do it somewhere else. We really appreciate it.
Oh, we love it.